Okay, today we're going to be talking about the Cuban Revolution. We talked about Guatemala last time. Some regional background. After the changes in the recent decades, for example, the growth of the industrial working class in Latin America through ISI, the post-World War II return of U.S. influence, and U.S. support of dictators, as well as the continuing social and economic inequalities in Latin America, Marxism starts to really gain popularity in the region in the 1950s. So the Marxists focus on revolutionary change, the working class rising up and getting rid violently of the upper class. This makes sense in the Latin American context. For so long, the upper class had been exploiting the poor. This idea of the only way to get rid of these people is to basically kill them it makes a fair amount of sense to the Latin American poor and working class. So let's talk about the revolution itself. It's led by a guy named Fidel Castro. He's a nationalist, and he ends up getting imprisoned for a failed coup attempt against the US-backed dictator of Cuba, a guy named Batista. Castro turns the trial into sort of a public statement of what he thinks Cuba should be. He's quite popular among people, but he ends up getting exiled with his brother Raul, and it's in Mexico where they meet Ernesto Che, his nickname Che Guevara. The three of them form a kind of revolutionary band, and they head back to Cuba with 82 men to overthrow Batista's government. Of the 82 that make the initial landing, only about 12 survive for very long. Batista sends forces in, and most of them are killed. But these 12 guys, they head into the mountains in central Cuba, and they wage a guerrilla war, meaning like they choose the point at which they're going to attack. Small attack, head back into the jungle. Somewhere else, small attack, head back into the jungle. And they do this for a very long time, months and months and months. Over time, the incapacity of the government to put down this rebellion starts to make the rebels really very popular. More and more people start heading into the jungle to join them. Their army gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. While Batista, whose rule increasingly depends on a police state, arresting people who disagree with him, that sort of thing, his popularity really decreases. Until finally, on 31 December 1958, Batista flees Cuba. Heads off out of the country. Revolutionary forces come down out of the mountains and enter Havana. The revolutionaries, one of the first things they do is they go into Havana, they go into the cities of Cuba, they find all the people who supported Batista, people who had been in the police, people who had helped in the army and these kinds of things, and they kill them. It's a fairly bloody purge, but this is just kind of how things are. The revolutionary government, once it takes control, because that's it, the people kind of are very, very happy the revolutionaries are in charge, and that's it. These 12 guys go from being this tiny little force up in the mountains to being the head of the government in Cuba in 1959. They enact immediate land reform, and they start to enact profit sharing from some of the agricultural production. The idea is they're trying to help the poor in Cuba. The US, however, keep in mind this is, again, the Cold War, they're afraid that Castro is a communist. There's nothing to indicate, based on the historical record from his writings or anything like that, that he was actually a communist in the beginning. But he's clearly influenced by Marx. Castro, Raul, Guevara is a full-on communist. But Fidel and Raul, they want to help, they want to help improve the lives of poor Cubans. And that's a semi-Marxist idea. Semi-Marxist, as far as the US is concerned, means Marxist at this point. And so Cuba becomes this major kind of battleground of the Cold War. The Soviet Union, excited, number one, that Castro kind of supports some of their ideas, but also excited the fact that the Americans are super nervous about this guy. The Soviet Union buys a bunch of Cuban sugar in exchange for Soviet oil. Great, no problem. The oil arrives, and the American-owned refineries refuse to process it. Oil comes out this like black stuff, and it's kind of useless until you refine it into gasoline. The American-owned refineries refuse to process it, and so the Cuban government says, okay, no problem, these are our refineries now. They send in the army, they take everybody prisoner, kick them off the island, and that's it. These refineries that had been American property, the property of American companies, are now property of the Cuban government. So the U.S., shocked that this had happened, declares that it will stop buying Cuban sugar. Obviously, sugar is the foundation of the Cuban economy still. No problem, the Cuban government says. So they seize all the mills, all the American-owned farms, they seize all the American-owned utilities. Basically, anything that's American-owned, the Cuban government takes it over. All right, in 1960, the United States says enough is enough. We refuse to trade at all with Cuba. This is a major blow because the American economy is massive. So be it, Cuba says, and they move closer, meaning like they start to trade with and come into political line with the Soviet Union and its allies. If the United States won't trade with Cuba, the Soviet Union will trade with Cuba. And so step by step, if Castro wasn't a communist, the reaction against what he's trying to do by the United States helps make him a communist. And then finally, with the trade agreements with the Soviet Union, clearly Cuba is in the camp of the Soviet Union. Remember, Cold War world divided basically in two. You're either with the United States or you're with the Soviet Union. In 1961, the United States trains a bunch of anti-Castro Cubans in Miami and sends them to a place called the Bay of Pigs, which is a bay in Cuba, to invade the island, convinced that the people of Cuba must be so upset that there's a communist in charge. The people of Cuba are super happy because the revolutionary government is trying to help the majority of Cubans. And so Castro's force easily defeats the Americans. The Americans have to basically say, oh, this wasn't us, it was a bunch of other people, it was the Cubans, we didn't have anything to do with this. It's a huge embarrassment for the United States. But what it shows the Cubans is that the United States is willing to do virtually anything to get rid of the Cuban government. And so, in 1962, we have what's called the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba accepts the idea that there could be that Cuba could be used to launch Soviet nuclear missiles. A United States spy plane discovers these missile sites on Cuba. Suddenly, Cuba, P.S., is 90 miles off the coast of Key West. In other words, nuclear missiles aimed at the United States 90 miles off the coast of the United States. Totally unacceptable to the Americans. John Fitzgerald Kennedy is the president at this point. So the U.S. tells the USSR, you have two choices. Either A, get rid of these missile silos, or B, we are going to war with Cuba. And by go to war with Cuba, what we mean is we will do whatever we need to do to destroy every single one of these missile silos. Suddenly, the United States and the Soviet Union are as close to nuclear war as they have ever gotten. The Soviets send their missiles on ships. The United States basically surrounds Cuba with the U.S. Navy, and for a while, no one's sure who's going to end up blinking. It's kind of a game of chicken. Finally, the Soviet ships turn around before they get intercepted by the United States Navy. The fear is what the Navy will have to do, the U.S. Navy will have to do, is they'll have to sink the Soviet ships. The United States ships sinking ships of the Soviet Union 100% could lead to nuclear war. The Third World War, essentially the annihilation of the entire human race. Finally, the USSR rather, the Soviet Union says, okay, we will take the sites down, but only if you pledge to the United States, only if you pledge to never, ever invade Cuba again. The United States agrees, and the Soviets turn their ships around, grab their gear, and pull it out of Cuba. The US keeps its pledge, but throughout the next several years, they keep trying to kill Castro. Sometimes in some pretty crazy ways. They hire gangsters to kill him. They try and poison a wetsuit of his. He's a big-time diver. They try and poison a cigar. He's also a big-time Cuban cigar smoker. They try and drug a cigar to make him look foolish. All kinds of crazy, ridiculous James Bond stuff. Okay, so this is going to come to an end here. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about, in the next very brief lecture, we'll talk about the effects of the revolution and some of the big ideas that we can take away from the Cuban Revolution in terms of the Cold War. Thank you.